Hello everybody, and welcome to the Wenner-Gren 75th anniversary panel stroke roundtable on anthropology in the public. Before I launch into the topic of anthropology in the public and getting our word out, which is so important in today's political circumstances, I want to tell you just a little bit about Wenner-Gren's 75th anniversary. We've just done the official history of the Wenner-Gren Foundation and published it in an open access issue of Current Anthropology. There's copies of these available in the exhibition hall, both in the Wenner-Gren table and the University of Chicago press table. We have a weird and wonderful history. And what's amazing about Wenner-Gren is that our endowment of $2 million US in 1941 has never been added to. And it's now worth close to $170 million. And we're able to give $5 to $6 million a year to the field. And one of our new initiatives at Wenner-Gren is our website, sapiens.org, to help popularize the field and get the word out. And again, in today's world, it is so important that the results of anthropological knowledge are presented to the general public in a way that they see the importance to their daily lives, in the same way we see the importance to our own academic lives. Now, what our purpose is in this roundtable is to touch on some of the many and varied ways that anthropology is trying to reach the public. So what we have is a lineup, starting with Emily Martin from Anthropology Now. And this was one of the very early initiatives to try to get anthropology to a general audience. We have Elise Waterstone from the AAA, who's going to give us a very short description of what they're trying to do in terms of public outreach. We have Alex Godlove from Savage Minds. We have Tanya Lerman, who's one of the most popular current op-edists from our field, and has gone a long way of getting the word out in a very palatable way. We have Erin Taylor from Popanth, which was one of the first popular web portals for anthropology. And she'll be talking about the challenges and all of trying to get something like this going when it's basically do-it-yourself. We also have Ship Caldwell, who's our editor-in-chief from Sapiens, who's going to talk about our initiative and, again, our successes and challenge. We have Anna-Maria Sullivan back in the back there, who's going to talk about popularizing our field from the outside. And at the very end, and certainly not because it's unimportant, we have Natalia Reagan from the Boaz Network, whose initiative is video-based. Now, what I've told everybody is they'll have around 7 minutes to introduce their initiative, talk about their successes, talk about their challenges. And what I would like is each of them to give a word of advice to any of you who's interested in launching into a popular anthropology initiative. Now, what we want to do is make as much time as possible available for discussion at the end. So if you have particular questions that are related to points that have been introduced, or anything new that you find relevant, we really do want to hear from you, because this is supposed to be a discussion. This is supposed to be brainstorming to help us all as a discipline get our word out to places that it really matters in our rapidly changing political world. So what I want to do is start with Emily Martin, who's going to give us her experiences with Anthropology Now. And we also need to apologize. This isn't exactly a roundtable setup, but we sort of, take what we get. And it's just advance there. So.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. And thanks to Leslie Aiello and the Wenner-Gren Foundation for organizing this panel. I feel myself it's imperative to state that we are holding this event in the wake of an election that many American voters and others around the world regard as a catastrophe. Protections, partial as they were for people of color, women, children, the elderly, LGBT people, and workers, rural and urban, are going to be rolled back. It's important to say that the work you're about to hear about in this session has become even more important, as Leslie just said, today than it was before November 8th, 2016. So now to a few words about Anthropology Now. From the beginning, the goal of Anthropology Now was to produce print and electronic form, clear, compelling writing about how anthropological research informs current social and political issues. We didn't really envision news exactly, but rather enlightenment of the news through anthropological insights and analyses. We are totally committed to do this without simplification or dumbing anything down. We seek writers who are doing anthropological research that illuminates the pressing issues of the day all around the world, from A to Z, from Andean quinoa, beer, and the CRISPR hack, to water, the XL pipeline, and Zika. A word about the history of how anthropology came into being. It began in 2001 with support from NYU and the Paradigm Publishers, owned by Dean Berkenkamp. Then, with the help of a Wenner-Gren Initiatives grant, we posted our first website in 2001 using Dreamweaver. I don't know if anybody even remembers Dreamweaver. There was, of course, no Facebook, no Twitter, and no Web 2.0. Then, as now, we wanted everything under one roof. Articles, different genres such as visual essays, beautiful covers, print and electronic versions. We wanted peer reviews so that junior anthropologists would be able to contribute and get credit toward promotion and tenure. And this slide, hello, slide. Any ideas? Oh. This slide are the first four, show the first four covers, starting in 2000 and something, I forget. As time went by and technology changed, we added genres, podcasts, an undergraduate zine, and extended our coverage of topics to art, museums, and science. This is the current issue cover. It's a picture of a memorial on a Paris street after the Charlie Hebdo event. We wanted to relate to the AAA, but remain editorial independent, so that we are grateful to have had a years-long arrangement with the largest AAA section, GAD, the General Anthropology Division, whereby the electronic version of Anthropology Now comes with a GAD membership. We're very grateful for this. What have we accomplished? We've moved in a stable and orderly way through our superb general editors, first Kate McCaffrey, then Maria Vesperi, and we are now in transition to our third general editor, Rylan Higgins, who is luckily a Canadian anthropologist from Halifax, Nova Scotia. So how does it work? Primarily, the general editor helps anthropologists rewrite their submissions. This is a huge time commitment, compensated to the editor only by modest teaching relief. Department editors generate content on their topics, photo essays, many of them from Magnum photographers, book reviews, timely essays on education, the arts, or political movements. The board of editors, 16 academic anthropologists in different geographical areas and working on different topics and areas of the world, help generate contributions, and our webmaster, social media editor, zine editors all contribute. All of this is pro bono. Unexpectedly, but happily, Anthropology Now was bought by Routledge Publishers in 2015 and is now handled by their journals division, Taylor & Francis. Taylor & Francis bundles journals and subscriptions to libraries around the world, so as part of this practice, Anthropology Now suddenly became available in over 2,200 libraries internationally. And we, of course, joined social media as soon as it existed, and our Facebook group now has 20,000 members. There's a picture of the web page showing the zine and some of the other departments. What are our challenges, as Leslie asked us? First, I will name three. First, how do we compensate participants for the immense amount of time and labor involved in this enterprise? We're like the housekeepers of anthropology. We bring in the newspaper, we haul out the trash, but we do not have funds to pay for all this labor. We have to rely on intangible rewards. Second, the main time sink is revising academic writing. Can graduate programs and other publications help train anthropologists to write in ways the general public can understand? And three, creating social value. Recall the various congressional efforts to label academic research as unworthy of funding by NSF or NIH, efforts that will surely get more intense after November 8th. As a discipline, to survive, we need to have our social value recognized. As they say, many hands make light work, so I'm happy to have so many other efforts join our commitment to extending understanding of anthropological approaches beyond the academy. All of you are welcome to join us. Submit article proposals, join the Facebook group, volunteer to become a department editor, all in the service of enabling the general public to comprehend what anthropology has to offer and in the effort to overcome income inequality, deindustrialization, and hateful acts based on invidious distinctions involving race, religion, gender, or class. These efforts have become even more important today than they were before November 8th, 2016. Thank you.
Okay, and what we'll do is we'll just move on. So if you have questions or points, save them for the discussion at the end. Okay, our next is Elise Waterstone.
Thank you so much, and thank you. And Emily, I won't repeat what you said at the start of your remarks, that we are in a very difficult time, to say the least. We know that anthropology has a lot to say about the human condition, about social change, about cultural meaning, about causes and consequences of the most critical issues facing the world, how we got here from there, and what the world needs to know about if we want a better future for humankind. We also know that our discipline struggles with communicating this knowledge to audiences beyond our own narrow circle. Yet, I believe we have come a long way on this effort. It's not a new problem. We've been struggling with it for a long time. I do not think it is true that anthropology or anthropologists never reach wider audiences. I think we do, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. Of course, we may not do so sufficiently, but I think it is important to acknowledge advances that have been made and identify those places where we can do more or do better, which is why I think this roundtable is so important, and thank you, Leslie, for putting it together. It enables us to hear about what works, or what seems to work, and what doesn't work or doesn't seem to work, and why we think that is so. So I look very much forward to our discussion. This conversation also enables us to see the ways in which we each, as individual anthropologists and as anthropological organizations, and I'm representing AAA today, collectively contribute to and can contribute to efforts to bring anthropological knowledge into the public conversation on the critical issues more important today than even last week when it was important. We need to conceptualize our combined efforts, in my view, as a collective, creative movement towards achieving a common goal. I also think this conversation can help us identify what we might need to focus on looking to the future. That said, I'd like to share a little bit about AAA's general approach to communications, and then offer a few examples of current projects that are efforts to reach larger audiences. These represent part of the contribution to the common goal. And let me see if I can get this thing to work. Did that work? Aha. Que bueno. In this slide, you can see that at the center of AAA's communication approach is an effort to increase awareness among various audiences of the value of anthropology and its contributions to society. This chart shows who AAA is talking about when it talks about audiences. Because I have only a few minutes to speak, I will simply list these audiences. They include you, AAA members, students, both undergraduate and graduate students, college and university departments. It includes those anthropologists who are not part of the association, who do self-identify as an anthropologist, and it includes those who no longer identify as an anthropologist because of where they are employed, for example. It includes non-academic employers. It includes policymakers, and it includes the media. It also includes educators, school children, middle schoolers, and high schoolers, and among the larger public, readers of serious nonfiction, like basically everybody. So in the few minutes I have left, I want to share with you a brief description of 3 AAA projects that I believe each contribute to the goal of bringing anthropology into the public conversation on critical issues and policy debates. The first is Open Anthropology, the association's first digital-only public journal that opens up anthropology by focusing on a timely topic, offering a selection of archived articles, introducing nearly the full archive of AAA journals, past and current, to readers who may not even know these exist, and making this content available free on the public internet for a period of time. And by means of the editor's framing introduction to each issue, opening up the discipline to the non-specialist reader. In 2016, Open Anthropology's editors Jason Antrosio and Sally Hahn have published 3 issues, one on cultural heritage, one on food, and one on elections, all timely topics. Of course, we're still trying to figure out who's reading these issues. We know numbers, how many, but we don't know who the folks really are. The second is AAA's public education initiatives, which are specific projects that provide various public audiences accessible information rooted in deep scholarship that is disseminated by various means, by multimedia, online sources and resources, through traveling museum exhibits, local bookstore readings, story gathering, storytelling and story sharing events, and with popular books, also bibliographies and scholarly articles. The RACE Project is AAA's first and very successful public education initiative, and by the way, the RACE exhibit is here in Minneapolis right now at the Science Museum. I think it's about 20 minutes away from here. The association is now trying to get off the ground a new initiative called World on the Move, 100,000 Years of Human Migration. It is a great and, of course, timely project. It is for this moment. Right now, we're looking to secure some solid funding to give legs to World on the Move. We've got the design, it's all in place. We just need support to give it the legs, as I said. So I'm spending, and Ed Lebo and I and others are spending a lot of time knocking on doors, begging. So if anybody can help us out, please let me know. Finally, I want to let you know about the newly formed President's Working Group on Tenure and Promotion Guidelines for Writing and Publishing Forms, the goal of which is to help tenure and promotion committees assess new forms of writing and publishing, the kinds we are discussing today. At the center of this project is the recognition that anthropologists are writing for broader audiences and are taking advantage of the opportunities the new communications tools allow. Yet, most departments and most tenure and promotion committees don't necessarily know what should or could count and how to recognize these new forms of communicating. So I have called upon Carol McGranahan, Elizabeth Chilton, Kate Clancy, and Bianca Williams to work with me to evaluate existing tenure and promotion assessment criteria at colleges and universities and all over the country, and to develop a set of usable guidelines for tenure and promotion committees, guidelines we expect to have ready in the next year. This is the kind of project that the AAA has the capacity to do and to provide you, as well as your departments, as well as your universities. These are a sampling of AAA projects that I consider parts of the larger endeavor that is anthropology and the public, where each of us as individuals, again, and as organizations, make complementary, not competitive contributions. Thank you very much.
Okay, and next we have Alex Godleb, who's known to many of you through Savage Minds, and is going to talk to us about blogging.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see everybody here today. Let me put on my timer here. Okay. Yeah, so my name is Alex Golub. I'm a professor of anthropology at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I run a blog, Savage Minds, along with several other people. We've been running this blog for about 10 years. I think I've been blogging for a couple of years earlier than that. So we're a collective. We don't have any sort of formal structure. When somebody wants to post on the blog, they do. We have guest bloggers who come on for stints of a couple of posts at a time. We also have occasional posts where if somebody wants to write something, we can publish it under our name and then just credit them and then go ahead and give them that content. We also have an occasional paper series, which gives us a chance to take blog posts or other longer pieces that we think it might still be useful to have in a kind of more chunky textual PDF form and put them online as well. So we've experimented about that. I think today, when we talk about the challenges and the successes that we face, there's several things that we should talk about. The blog, when we began it, was started because no one had done a group anthropology blog, but people had done group history and group political science blogs. That was the plan. That it was not a very complicated situation. And through virtue of just being around for quite a long time, we've managed to last. And when social media was invented, it really brought a lot of additional eyeballs to the site. So we have been unexpectedly popular. And if you don't want to read us, you don't have to. It'd be great to have less pressure. I think people feel SM has a kind of, I'm the only person on this platform who will tell you that. People feel like SM has a kind of presence, and we feel like we have a bit of a responsibility now to the community. So I want to talk about challenges and what the challenges are that we think that we are going to face in the future. Okay, my timer is turning off there. What we do in Savage Minds, we describe not as public anthropology. We call it doing anthropology in public. So we're not really trying to communicate research results in a way that we think other people want to hear, because we're not sure that we know what other people want to hear. And I think if there's one thing that we've realized since 11/9, it's that maybe those of us in this room don't understand what people are ready for, what they want to hear, and what the best forum to communicate with them is. So what we want to do is try to find a way to let people see the seams, let people see the work, let people see the way that the facts that we generate scientifically and through our scholarly work are stable, important, and true, but also very provisional, made by real people. They don't come from on high with some sort of deity in a lab coat who has objective science. I think the days when people are ready to hear that kind of message have sort of passed. So in the past, we've been very big proponents of open access and making sure that scholarly content and really all content is available for everyone to read. And I think one of the things that I'm interested in talking about now is a switch from a focus on open access products or finished open access content to a shift to open access process, letting people see how it is that we get the results that we get, letting people understand why they should have confidence in what we want to say. I think that there's a danger in today's America that we're going to be in a situation where the only people who think that we are experts about race is us. Right? So we need to demonstrate our value, not assert it. And we need to show the people who are consuming our OA content that the processes that we're going through are their processes, that the kind of thinking that they do, that science is a kind of practice that is accessible and intuitive to everyone once you explain how you do it. So one of the things that I think blogging is still really important for is trying to get people to think at greater length and in greater depth about the facts that they see go by all the time. And I think this is going to be particularly important if my PowerPoint disappears. All right, where is this? What's happening to me? Did I?
You just go back.
I don't even know how to go back. Yeah.
No, we need to put it back on.
All right. Maybe, I don't need the slides. I can just finish talking.
But you only have one.
I should have 3.
You only sent one, I think.
Okay.
But
Okay. Well, one of the main ways that we need to do this is to demonstrate to people that when we have an engagement, we talk about race, which is a conversation we're going to have again from scratch. When we talk about things like, did the Holocaust happen? When we talk about things like, what is the origins of the Electoral College? How are laws made? What are the values that we hold? All of these things are conversations that we're going to have where our interlocutors are treated at the same level as us. We believe that they are people who are capable of engaging in the same kind of discourse, the same level of discourse as us. They might not spend as much time and depth thinking about, what happened in Cameroon in 1997 and 1998. We are content experts in that way. But I think that it's just important to recognize that the kinds of discussions, the kinds of controversies that we have inside the academy, we need to have them outside of the academy as well. And blogging is still a valuable place to do that because you can get a message to people that is longer than a sentence. Yeah. So all of the discussions, all of the citations, all of the research, we need to put that online because in some ways the democratic promise of America has been realized. Everybody really does vote. Everybody does really participate in the public square. And it's up to us to try to create a public square and a public that's in alignment, I think, with American values today. And doing that is going to have to show to people that, oh my goodness, first my PowerPoint goes. It's going to have to show people that the way that we've learned to handle knowledge, reason, claims, evidence, that's the way that everybody should be handling knowledge today. Not just because we're in charge and not just because we're important, because it's actually the best and most accurate way to do it. So I think that's what we need to see on the internet more often. I hope it takes place in a lot of places, including blogs. Thank you very much.
okay, our next speaker is Tanya Luhrmann, who is one of the most successful anthropological op-ed writers, and she'll give us her perspective.
Thank you, Leslie. Okay. Oops. It's good to see you here. So I've written over 30 op-ed pieces for the New York Times, over 30 reviews and short pieces for places like the LA Times, the TLS, like the New York Times Book Review. I've written longer essays in American Scholar and Raritan and Wilson Quarterly and Harper's. I'll be writing for Harper's again this winter. I don't think of myself as primarily a public intellectual. I still publish in the scientific and scholarly journals. In the last 2 years, I've published in the British Journal of Psychiatry and in Schizophrenia Bulletin, 2 neuropsychiatry science journals. I've published in Topics in Cognitive Science, in Current Anthropology, in Cambridge Anthropology. My last book, or the book that just came out with the University of California Press, and the next book will come out with Princeton. And then I'll return to writing books that come out with Knopf or with some crossover trade publication. So why do I do that? I do it because I think of myself as a writer. I identify as a writer. I've got a literary streak and a scientific streak, and that's just the way I'm made up. I used to worry about whether that made sense in the profession that I'd chosen, and now I've decided it's just the way I am. That's what I do. But why bother to write for the public domain at all? If you're a writer, you want to be read, and you want to figure out how to write well. And my message today is that writing in the public domain is the single best way of teaching yourself how to write, because nobody has to read anything that you have to say. If you're writing an academic book, typically you're writing something that somebody hopes will be available to sophomores and will be assigned in their classes, and they will have to get through your manuscript. If you're writing for the Times, if you're writing for Harper's, nobody has to get past the first 2 sentences. And so it is a fabulous discipline to make you craft your sentences so they do for you what you want them to do in the world. What are the challenges of doing this? Well, it's super hard. It is a lot of work to write clearly. I think it's substantially harder to write pieces that can be read by your mother and your aunt and your uncle than it is to write in ways that our anthropology journals allow us to write. You have to know exactly what you're arguing. You can't hide behind theory or complex language. My colleague Jim Ferguson talks about the magic language of anthropology. And there's something really true in that, and there's something kind of wonderful in it. But you can't use it if you're writing for a broader public, and that means you can't hide behind the magic. You are rejected more often by the public domain than you are by an anthropology journal. By the time you're 4 times into your revise and resubmit for American Anthropologists, you're pretty confident that you can get published there. That doesn't happen when you send something to the Atlantic or the New York Times. Your editor at these public settings is substantially meaner than your editor at the Journal of the Royal Anthropological Institute. That's his or her job. It's his or her job to say, this is not a useful sentence, rewrite. It is substantially more time sensitive. I remember the first time that somebody from the Atlantic said, oh, I'd be interested in this from you. And I behaved the way an academic behaved. I kind of thought about it, I fretted about it, and 6 months later, I turned it in. That was way too late for him. When an editor at Harper's or the New York Times says, revise and resubmit, he means this afternoon, by the end of the day, cancel the rest of your appointments and get it done. It's just a feature of writing in this kind of world. And that's hard. That's what it's like. It's extra. I don't think it can substitute for academic writing. I think that crossover books do work. So my last 2 books with Knopf did work for me as a kind of a means of academic advancement. Committees understood what I was doing with these books, and they were sort of larded with the footnote apparatus that I would use for a scholarly text. The structure of the sentences was just a little different. But I actually think it's right, although I recognize that there's an argument. I actually think it's right that my op-ed pieces don't count for promotion and advancement in the same way as an article in American Anthropologist. I think that they do a different kind of job in the world, and they're a super important job. They advance my career, but I don't think they should speak to tenure committees in the same way as my scholarly writing. So they're extra. That's hard. Finally, people yell at you. The first time I wrote a piece in the New York Times, I had over 600 comments, and the vast majority of the comments were not complimentary. I mean, people just say stuff. That's why they're writing, and that's what it's like to participate. I wrote something in the New York Times that I thought was innocuous, and the chair of the psychiatry department at Columbia University went on a public rampage in like Medscape or something. That also makes it hard. At the same time, I think this teaches you an enormous amount about how to write. I'm confident that the ease and speed with which I write in any domain is made more likely or arises from my training in writing in the public domain. I think that writing in the public domain makes me able to sing just a little bit more in all of the things that I write. And for a writer to be read, and every so often somebody will say that they've cried because they've read something you've written, or you've changed their mind, or if they thought about something profoundly differently. It gives you a high that I don't think you can get, or I don't think I can get in any other way. So I fully recommend it.
So I think the take-home message there is to get out and do it. Okay, next up is Aaron Taylor, who's going to tell us about Popanth and oops, sorry about that. I'm trying to keep even myself on time. Aaron.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm very happy to be here. First, I would like to start by saying I completely agree with Tanya that writing for the public is so much harder than writing for an academic audience. You really have to know what you want to say, and you really want to try and get some sense of what you want to say across in the very first sentence of your article, which can make it very challenging. And I'd also like to reiterate what Elise said, which is that anthropologists do indeed reach wider audiences. And this is not just an occasional thing. We reach people all the time. But when we started Popanth back in 2012, I didn't realise that. And in fact, the reason why Popanth exists is because I was part of a conversation on the Open Anthropology Cooperative about why we're not doing much popular anthropology. And some of you might know Greg Downey of Neuroanthropology. He made the comment that the point is we need to just start doing popular anthropology and see what works. And so my husband Gwen, who's in the audience, responded to that immediately. Within 5 minutes he said, right, I'm going to make some structures here. So he bought the Popanth domain, he made our Twitter account and Facebook account and so on, thinking that then we would just take that over. Little did he know that then he had to build the whole website for Popanth. So while he was busy building this website, I actually had a look around on the internet to see what actually was out there in terms of popular anthropology. You know, was there really so little, or was it just hiding? And it took quite a while and a lot of research, but in fact I did discover that there is a huge amount of popular anthropology all over the place. It's just that most of us don't know about it, which is a bit of a concern, because if us anthropologists don't realise the extent of what we're doing, how is anyone else supposed to know? You know, and if you think about, people complain that economists get so much press time. Economists all know, more or less, that economics is a popular discipline, that they have this big impact, but we're not aware of what we were actually able to do. So another thing we did is, besides Popanth, we consider to be not just the website, although it's our flagship feature. It is part of what we do. So knowing that, in fact, there was all this popular anthropology out there, In fact, having realised you can't go more than 5 minutes without encountering something written by an anthropologist or that quotes an anthropologist, we set out to turn Popanth into something that would actually emphasise the breadth of that work. So even our website, on which we publish original articles written mostly by anthropologists, Gawain set it up so that it's full of links out to other work elsewhere, other popular anthropology. On our author bio pages, we have links to people's popular books that they've written. On every article, we have suggestions for further reading, which mostly links out to things that are written by anthropologists or that are broadly anthropological. Another thing we do is we use our social media accounts extensively to promote popular anthropology in all times and places, so wherever it's been published. So just about every week I'll go through an RSS feed I have with different sites, and I will find things that I can then retweet in our accounts. And I use a third-party program called Buffer to do that, so I only have to do it once, and the program will send it out for me weekly. So that's a good way of making sure I can have some effect in terms of getting people aware of what's going on without putting, 5 hours in every day to do the social media accounts. And Sapiens has been great because it's one more thing on our list that I can now start to retweet all the time, which is fabulous. Another thing we do is 2 years ago, actually, we had an installation at the AAA in Washington, D.C., which actually Natalia Reagan was part of, and also Agustin Fuentes. And for that, we made a booklet, which is a composition of different popular anthropology articles written by people around the world. We put a lot of effort into trying to find out who was writing, not just in the United States or in Australia or even in Europe, but also in Africa and South America, to make some sort of product that would show people, hey, anthropologists are doing this everywhere. So I'll come back briefly to just explain the website a little, because it is our main feature. So basically the way it's set up is it has 4 sections. We went with the kind of the 4-field approach just to see, because we wanted to see, as Danny said, what would happen with that, who would submit things and what would they be about. And the way it works is that actually anyone can submit an article to us. You don't have to be an anthropologist. You don't have to show us your AAA membership card or anything like that. And the articles will go into a review process. We have a team of around 8 editors. So the articles will go to them. They will have 2 weeks to review it and come back with comments. And mostly their comments are about the style of writing and whether or not it is anthropological enough, because we have been working on trying to think a lot about what counts as popular anthropology. So then I will take the comments and I'll go back to the author and let them know what the comments were, which ones they really must think carefully about, and which ones are optional. They can make up their own minds whether to take them on board or not. Then they submit an article back to me, and I will do the final editorial work of just really making sure that it is actually fit for public consumption, not too much jargon and so on and so forth. So the audience we go for, we don't just go for necessarily just a across-the-board general audience. Some of our articles are suitable to pretty much anyone to pick up and read. Some of them are more specialty articles, so we try and maintain a variety in that sense. So we've been going for 4 years now, and in that time we've published 161 articles by a total of 72 authors, and we've had roughly around 500,000 visitors, which is actually pretty good considering that we're a fairly small site, completely volunteer run, no funding whatsoever, and we don't do an extensive amount of social media work. We do a little, but what we find overall is that people will simply pick up our stuff through social media somewhere that's been shared around, or through a term search. So what have we discovered in that time? Well, for me, one of the most interesting things that's happened out of Popanth is to see what people choose to write about. It became obvious very, very quickly that there are a whole lot of anthropologists out there who have all these ideas of things that they could write about, but they have nowhere to publish them. These ideas are not suitable for journals, they're not suitable for books necessarily, and a lot of them are not actually suitable for mainstream media because they're quite experimental. So we've had articles on things as diverse as migrant material culture in the USA, Why cyclists can't read maps in Australia, which is an interesting article, and someone told me yesterday they're using it in their teaching. Greek attitudes to cash after the economic crisis, and that was one that I actually solicited because I wanted some commentary on that issue at the time. Researching emotions in Cape Verde, and our most popular article to date was actually one I wrote on a whim, which was called 10 Things I've Learned About the Portuguese, that went completely viral around the Portuguese communities, attracted around 300,000 readers, and is still getting comments today, because it tended to be quite... I wrote it in a way that was quite humorous, I thought, but the audience was completely divided as to what they thought about it. You know, as Tanya said, people can become quite intense in their comments, and people either tended to be in complete agreement with my take on Portuguese culture or completely against. And those kinds of articles are fantastic for what they can tell you about the range of ways in which your material, which you think is completely innocuous, might be received. So, in other words, I think our main contributions to date are in three areas. One, for authors, what we provide for people is a space for experimentation more than anything else. We do a lot of mentoring because we receive a fair few new authors as well as people who are more established. Tanya herself has published on Popanth. We're very grateful for that. But that experimenting is absolutely key, and that by far has been the best thing coming out of Popanth for me. The other thing we provide, of course, is for the public, we provide that material, so things that would otherwise probably never see the light of day are available to be read and commented on. And also, I suppose, thinking of students as a kind of public, people say to me that they like using our articles in teaching because they really give the students sort of an insight into what an anthropological thinking might be. And the final group, of course, is the anthropology community, precisely because we are trying to do that work of bringing together all the different sources of popular anthropology, especially short-form writing, and at least make them visible, give them some sort of way to get out there among anthropological audience as well as public ones. So just quickly, in terms of the problems we've encountered, they haven't necessarily been what you'd expect. So one thing that surprised us is that even though setting up Popanth was a lot of work, and I would caution anyone thinking of starting a new site, the first year or so is rather difficult, but became stable very quickly. We ended up with a stable amount of submissions coming in. Our editorial team became very stable, and so in fact, after that initial year or so, Popanth actually became very easy to run and to keep going. We're also not too concerned about our readership levels. It would be lovely to know more about our readers and get their feedback on what we're putting out there. But our analytics do show a fairly healthy readership, and people do obviously have their ways of finding our material. So our main problem actually that we've encountered has been outreach to authors around the world. We do very much try to create a global site that reflects global issues and that includes authors from all around the place. But the outreach to potential authors is by far and away the most time-consuming aspect of the website. And if anybody feels like volunteering to help, we would love more people to try to get other people around the world to submit articles to Popanth. So just, of course, my question for the audience is how can we work together? Because what we really need to do, I feel, is to come together to cross-promote each other's work in order to get those kinds of visibilities we want. Thank you.
Okay, and next is a very similar endeavor. It's perhaps the newest initiative on the panel, and that's Sapiens, that's Wenner-Gren sponsored.
Good afternoon. Like many of my colleagues, I'm going to begin by talking about November 8th. After the election, like so many of my colleagues and people around the world, I fell into a spiral of despair, reflecting on the turmoil of the election and America's waiting future. And as I thought about what had just happened, I was fumbling in the dark for some hope. And as I was doing that, I saw a beacon of light in Ruth Benedict's powerful argument that the purpose of anthropology is to make the world safe for human differences. And in the last week, that quote, that argument has resonated more and more with me, and I've become less desolate and more motivated than ever to help anthropology address the world's churning chaos. If we think about everything from Syria to Brexit, natural disasters and climate change, health disparities, economic inequalities, and on, we've needed anthropology before the election, and now we need it more than ever. At the same time, we need to find space to pause and reflect on the wondrous aspects of the human experience, of art and love, of beauty, of resilience and survival, and we need to remember those as well. The need for anthropology coincides with the discipline's eagerness to make itself relevant. In recent years, I've met dozens of anthropologists, if not hundreds of them, who want their work to extend beyond their academic goals. All of the organizations and individuals here, and I recognize many of you out there, are deeply committed to making sure that anthropology is a window to see into the experience of other people and also a mirror to reflect on our own. The Wenner-Gren Foundation joined this movement by launching Sapiens on January 28th of this year. Sapiens is an online magazine that aims to become an important public voice for the field by publishing great stories that spark meaningful conversations around the world about anthropological ideas, theories, and thinking. Sapiens is geared towards your neighbor, your cousin, your barista, assuming your barista doesn't have a BA and just couldn't get a job in anthropology. You know, the very people outside of our field are the people that we're trying to reach. In the last 10 months, we've published 150 pieces, predominantly essays, features, and op-eds, although we've also published videos, photo essays, and reviews. Like I'm sure all my colleagues up here that have these sites, I would very much invite you to look at the site and consider submitting pieces, as we're always eager for new anthropologists to work with. One thing that we do is bring together anthropologists with journalists. We want our pieces deeply grounded in anthropological research, but we want to use the best of journalistic storytelling. To date, we've had about 750,000 unique page views from nearly every country in the world. We're still working on North Korea. Many of our pieces have also been read by tens of thousands of people through our syndication partnerships with Slate, Discover Magazine, and Scientific American. And further successes are indicated by one of our articles being debated in the pages of the New York Times, and one of our authors was approached by a major literary agent based on the success of her piece. And so in terms of opportunities, as we were asked to reflect on for this panel, I want to begin by emphasizing three big picture points. First, there's a real need for anthropology in the public sphere. Second, there's a real desire by anthropologists to help shape public conversations. And third, that Sapiens and these other outlets are helping to prove that public anthropology does have a ready audience. They're waiting for us. We just need to find ways to get out there and reach them. The challenges are many, and we've heard some of them, and I'm sure we're going to hear many more throughout the morning. But for me, some of the primary ones include encouraging anthropology programs to offer in-depth training for public communication and specifically writing. To echo Tanya's comment, writing is a craft. It's like learning to become a bricklayer. You need to cultivate the practice of it to become successful at it. I'm also finding with Sapiens that it is very much a crowded digital market space for news and information, and that's probably only going to increase, and so breaking through that and finding a space for yourself can be difficult. And And then thirdly, we need to, I think, continue to develop tools to foster a kind of deep engagement with anthropological ideas. This maybe goes back to Alex's point on some level, not just kind of a superficial reading of anthropology at the headline level. And so while these challenges and many that have already been addressed, I think are very real, I think most of them can be overcome. And I think they need to be overcome if we're going to heed Ruth Benedict's argument that we need to make the world safe for human differences. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Anna Milana, and she's from Peeps magazine. And I think she has some handouts there. Well, why didn't you come up and talk, and we'll have someone else circulate it for you. And Anna Milana's initiative is a bit different from everything we've heard so far.
I've grown quite accustomed to people saying things that I do are a little bit different from things that they've heard so far. It tends to be a status quo for me. I am, in fact, with Peeps magazine, and we are, as Leslie has indicated, a little bit different from the other initiatives on the panel, primarily because we are not an academic initiative, rather that we are a product. Ooh, I ran, I'm a little out of breath. I'm sorry, folks. And while we have 3 platforms that we function on, our focus is primarily on the production of an independent magazine. And the reason for that is because we feel that there's something very important about honoring information, especially information that's as deeply researched as the material that we have in our magazines, in a permanent and material form, something that people can reference back to, something that people can hold dear and encounter and engage with in a sensory experience. Excuse me. So, Peeps magazine is an independent magazine that tracks cultural shifts around the world. That's our way of saying that we take the work of both practical and academic anthropologists and repurpose it in narratively engaging stories that are then paired with world-class photojournalism. World-class photojournalism and illustration, and then packaged by our incredibly talented founders who are the designers of the magazine. As it's being passed around, you'll see it fits in within an aesthetic that is uniquely identifiable as an independent magazine, and something that is a market that is growing quite rapidly, less so in Canada and the United States because of distribution challenges, but very, very strongly in other parts of the world, most especially in Europe. England has a number of stores that are devoted exclusively to the sale of independent magazines and the development of this particular market. So the reason we do this is in no small part because the founders of this magazine have encountered the work of anthropologists as they've done their design work over the years, and they've become impassioned believers in the quality and importance of the work, and most importantly, the incredible stories that come out of this that are deeply informative and engaging. And so they have developed this format and space for anthropological research to be highlighted and shared in a way that they themselves would choose to read it. Everybody on the team sits outside of the academy. There is nobody on the executive panel who actually works, or the executive of the company, that actually works within the academy. Any information that we carry in the magazine has been peer-reviewed in external resources and external spaces and is repurposed within our magazine for distribution. And I've kind of gone off the direction I wanted to go on because I felt deeply inspired by so much of what all of the folks on the panel are saying. Tanya Lerman is exactly right. Writing is a craft, but so is the production of a publication. There is thought and there is incredible complexity in producing a publication that shows and rises to the standard of the writing that is paired with it. That is an important aspect of the publication of a magazine and a website as well. And we have a unique opportunity to be able to have folks who are deeply invested in this project put all of their skills into that without necessarily costing us what it would necessarily cost somebody to pay a designer of this caliber to be able to do the work. So a bit about independent magazines, backing up a tiny bit. Many people don't know much about them. They know that they exist, but people tend to assume that because mass market magazines are actually going down in terms of sales and in terms of, in some case, of credibility in terms of content, that the magazine industry and the print industry is going to disappear. It's actually quite the opposite. There's an incredibly prolific industry in independent magazines. These 16 are a fraction of the 300 magazines that were submitted to the Stack Magazine Awards this year for consideration for Independent Magazine Awards, and that in turn is just a fraction of the magazines that are available for sale in the world. What differentiates an independent magazine from a mass market magazine is that it is a small run, generally between 2,000 and 10,000 copies, and it is produced less frequently in many cases. We are biannual, semi-annual, and there are others that publish as frequently as once a month, but it's very rare. Generally speaking, it's quarterly to twice a year. Additionally, what distinguishes it is that these magazines are niche market driven. They are exceptionally in depth, they are very studied, and they cater to markets that are very interested in a particular area. So in looking at where Peeps sits in that market by bringing anthropological research to the readership, if we were to cater simply to people who are interested in anthropology, we wouldn't necessarily have the market we would need to be able to sustain ourselves. What we are appealing to is an interest on the part of readers in something that is, in storytelling that engages a deeper understanding of human culture, particularly putting context before events. In other words, instead of reporting on an event somewhere in the world, we tell the stories of these cultures and then reference events that may or may not be world issues, bringing them into the story so that they actually are presented within a larger framework or perspective of the culture that's being depicted. Independent magazines run between, because they are niche market and small run between $14 and $25 per issue, and people are glad to have them. It's considered a signifier of their personal brand, if you will, but most importantly, and that's the kind of shallow version of it, but the more exciting aspect of it is that we have folks who are looking at this as something to display the knowledge that they're acquiring, again, in their coffee tables, in their homes, so that they can share it with their friends in a permanent, immediate, and sensory way. So our formula at Peeps is to take embedded, years-long research, engaging it with visual and textual storytelling, because all of our stories are paired with the work of world-class photojournalists. Those photojournalists actually take the stories beyond the stories themselves. They go in, and generally speaking, we try to work as often as possible with photographers from the areas in which the work has been done. So it gives the photographers an opportunity to be able to comment back and or push further into the stories that are being told by the anthropologists. The setup of the magazine is a bit unique insofar as, because we know that we're appealing to a wide spectrum of potential readers, those who are interested in, say, the practical applications of ethnographic research, the people who are doing research on, let's say, the habits of Americans in morning rituals and how to better design a toothbrush, or somebody who is interested in the cultural impacts of economic and social change in one part of the world and another part of the world. We get to contain both of these within our magazine because both of these are studied and analyzed by people who work in ethnographic and anthropological practice, which is amazing to us. But these attract different readers. So as a way of visually distinguishing between the two, we've set up a yellow section, which is our business section, and a white section, which is our larger social section. And the analogy wasn't deliberate. It wasn't, for those of you who remember phone books, it wasn't deliberate to make it yellow pages and white pages, but that's how it actually turned out, and I think it holds. So as with any other project, we have indicators of success. And for us, the indicators include how large is our readership and who comprises that leadership. Who are our sponsors? Do we have a good mix of ethnographic research firms, academic institutions, professional organizations, anthropological or otherwise, social media engagement, dissemination of our content, either through classrooms, links, blogs, et cetera, and awards and recognition. And so we are new and we are small, so we aren't necessarily expecting huge strides to be made yet, but we're very proud of the accomplishments that we have made. Social media is quite active for us and quite supportive. Missy Icewine's comment came immediately after the production of our first issue, which was challenging and a bit heart-wrenching, as is the production of the first issue of anything, any project. And her comment that we were one of the most visually and exciting and intellectually exciting magazines was a solve for us. And when we were recently nominated for both Best Magazine Launch and Best Original Nonfiction Story at the Stack Awards, we actually agreed with Katie Ellenberger, who indicated that to her that was a sign that there was a space for public anthropology and that this was a successful endeavor. So aside from this, the other indicator that we like to bring up when we're talking about the magazine is the subscription services. There are a number of services available globally that curate magazines. Sure, I'm 1 minute away, thanks. That curate magazines for distribution to people around the world who wouldn't necessarily be looking explicitly for, this is their way of exposing themselves to new things. Both of these subscription services have come on with us for issue 3 as well and are incredibly supportive of the work that we're doing. The feedback and the reviews we've received from their readers have been astonishing. So to us, that says there is a place for this kind of magazine. The challenges we face, as Leslie has asked us to indicate, are actually, there are a number of them, but with reference to this audience, the ones that are most kind of relevant for us are, first of all, getting academics to trust that writing in a narratively engaging way will increase the interest and trust that the readership will have in their materials. And I think that Dr. Lerman actually commented brilliantly about the importance of being able to craft your materials. I think it's also about trusting your editor, especially when we sit outside of the academy. I think that's frightening, and we understand that, but if you learn to trust us, we will help you get stuff out there, and people will read it, and they will love it. We have seen it. And lastly, Peeps as a magazine is very unique, even within the framework, even within the industry that it's working within or the market that it's operating in. And it can act as an ambassador for anthropology. Primarily because it's user-driven, because it's reader-driven, because our team are the people who love your work and want to get it out there. We will do the translation for you, and we want you to succeed. And if we can get you using us in that way, then we will feel that we have succeeded tremendously. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. And we have one more, last but not least, is Natalia Reagan.
Hello, everybody. So I am co-founder of Boaz Network. How do I show just the first slide? Or? There you are. So that's Boaz Network, my website that I co-founded with a friend of mine who's a cultural anthropologist. I being a biological anthropologist, we joined forces, and we wanted to create a site in the beginning that was going to be all things and all you can eat buffet of anthropology. But we are now focusing on just doing videos because we realized with a 2-person show you can only do so much. And like everybody else here, last week's election really rattled both of us. And I definitely feel like we're living in truly interesting times. And I've been able to speak at the AAA. This is the 3rd year in a row, and I'm very thankful to be able to speak about anthropology in the public. And I always liken it, and this is unfortunately way too close to home, to voting. If you're given the opportunity to discuss your work and how you did it and your results and really kind of put it into the context that it needs to be in, seize that opportunity. Because like an election, if you don't vote, you can't complain about the result. And if you don't take that opportunity and discuss your work, you can't bemoan how it's represented or misinterpreted by perhaps a writer that maybe got it a little off. Because I know that for me, when I do television shows and things of that sort, sometimes I'll give it a title that is scientifically inaccurate, and I pull my hair and I get all upset, and luckily I can work with people to maybe change the title to make it accurate, but sometimes you don't have that opportunity if it's already written and out there. So I always say go ahead and be open to talking about your work, whether it is for an article or if you're asked to appear on a television show. And I think now more than ever, we need to democratize science. I'm all about science for social change, and anthropologists, we are storytellers. That's first and foremost. We talk about the past, we talk about the present, we hypothesize about the future based on things that have happened in the past. And given what has happened in the past week, this is the perfect time to do it. So as far as what I tell people that want to do video, there's a million suggestions I could give, but one of the key suggestions is have a 30-second elevator pitch of your research. Have a soundbite, whether it's got a little bit of humor infused. If you don't study something that's humorous, maybe it's sort of a very lasting impression, a good quote that can't get diced up too much, because soundbites can get diced up and made, I hosted a Bigfoot show a few years ago, Bigfoot TV show, and boy, did they try to make it sound like, I believe in Bigfoot, he is out there, even though I said, I do not believe in Bigfoot, he is not out there. But they would do anything to kind of cut it around and twist it. So finding a concise soundbite that really wraps up what you do, I think is very important. And I'm actually going to be at the expo later with camera equipment. If you guys want to come and practice, I'll have a booth there. But a little bit about Boaz Network. The reason why we started this is we felt that anthropology was fascinating. I always joke that anthropologists, there's the most interesting man in the world. We are the most interesting people in the room. If you go to a party, usually people are like, wait, what? You're an anthropologist? They either ask, what the heck is that? Or, wow, tell me more. What do you study? And usually you have to explain to them that you're not Indiana Jones, but that's the thing. The more we have different people from anthropology, all 4 fields represented out there, the more people are going to have questions that are not, again, explaining why you're not Indiana Jones. But people are interested in what we study. And I feel like with this whole idea of science for social change, right now, obviously, what's going on in the country, talking about human variation, marginalized populations, how we are more similar than different in many ways, and how even though we are different, those differences make us beautiful and interesting and can unite us in some ways. So I think anthropologists definitely have, I think, an ethical responsibility to discuss what we know about our species and how that can bring us together. In terms of challenges, because just to give you a little background about myself, I was an actor and I did comedy before I fell into this wonderful world of anthropology. I didn't think I could become an anthropologist because I didn't excel in math and science in high school, so I was like, I'm gonna go be an actor. And when I went back to school, I fell in love with anthropology specifically, and I wanted to meld the two. I feel like science and comedy is just the dynamic duo. No, seriously, I read a peer-reviewed article, and I mean, there's some really great punny article titles out there, but sometimes they're not even intentional, and I'm laughing my proverbial ass off. So, if some of your work, and that's the thing is when you do get interviewed, I always tell people, and I've worked with some wonderful anthropologists who are in the audience, Dr. Karen Stryer, Dr. John Marks, Augustine Fuentes, all have been wonderful people to interview, but there's an idea if you're going to be on a show that is a comedy show, if you're going to be on The Daily Show, infuse whatever you're talking about with some comedy. If you're going to be on the Today Show, you don't have to dumb it down, but maybe make it a little bit more palpable to a early morning audience. So there's ways that you can work to make your work easy to understand without dumbing it down. So as far as challenges for me with Boaz Network, we're a 2-person show. Kohania and I have different careers, and we have to kind of go where the money is. And we've turned our Boaz Network into a nonprofit. And so right now we're applying for grants because in the future we would like to produce a curriculum-based web series. So I have a web series called Talking Shit with Dr. Todd and Natalia. I hosted it with Dr. Todd Disotell, a molecular anthropologist at NYU, and we changed it to Talking Science because we want money. And but we would like to turn that into taking a biological anthropology class and putting together 15 different videos that have to do with each particular class or linguistics or intro to cultural. But we want to bring other people into that. So if anybody is interested in being interviewed, because I do a lot of interviews at these meetings, I'm available for that. And also one of the things that we've been able to do is we've teamed up with the AAPA and Ideas Project and NSF to put together videos that promoted, we're looking at how we can be more inclusive in the AAPA, making it a more diverse field since we do study human diversity and variation, it makes sense. And also I do with conjunction with Boaz, we produce videos and trailers for people's books. So if you have a book that you want to, make fun and exciting, I make these commercials that I think speak to a broader audience, and hopefully will get more of our work out there and read by the layperson. So thank you so much, and here's to Science for Social Change.
Okay, and now it's over to you, because there's a few things that I think have come out of this. Everyone on the stage here has sort of put themselves on the line to more or less believe in their dream of communicating anthropology. They've all done it in different ways. And the one message that's come out of it is it's not easy. It hurts your ego when your pieces are attacked. It's difficult to write for a popular audience. It's difficult to get funding for any of these initiatives. And I think everybody here on the stage has put a tremendous amount of effort in their own time and their own money into getting their initiatives off the ground. But what we also have are a lot of opportunities here. And there's many other opportunities we could have included on the panel. But we wanted to select a spectrum of what's there now. One of the issues for me that also came out was, how do you get this out? Because we've got fantastic stuff going. And I'm sure that some of you in the audience didn't know of individual of these initiatives. And we're in the field, and we should know about it. So before we have the panel talk anymore, do we have any questions from the audience, or points that you want to raise, or things that you think we might be missing in these initiatives? Everybody's happy with what's being done? Yes. Do you want to? Yes, we have a map.
Are you opening up to general discussion? It's on. Is it working? My name's Rena Letterman. I'm at Princeton, and I was also involved in co-authoring the AAA's response to two initiatives that had to do with the revision of the IRB regulations, and that I'll get around to in a second. But what I'm interested in relation to all of what you've said, I strongly support Elise's comment about how we are out there and all of that. And I think that what you all have demonstrated that. And I think that's fantastic. And I really appreciate this whole panel. What I'm wondering about, and that's been raised in sort of implicitly, is how we assess how people are receiving. In other words, reception is a big question. How are you can quantify clicks and so on. You can quantify, how many people have seen your site, perhaps. But how people actually make sense of how people are reading these things is a big question. Tanya addressed this question. You're getting reviews, so to speak, or responses. But this is what I'm wondering about: how we assess people's reception or understanding of what we're putting out there. And the reason why I mentioned the work that I've done with respect to the regulations having to do with regulatory ethics and the revisions of the code and so on. What the people that I've been interacting with outside of the academy are policymakers and government regulators in particular, and the various academics who put themselves in those positions. They don't value us. Many of them are deeply dismissive of the kinds of let me call it qualitative, but more specifically interpretive work. And I've been battling this stuff for years now, made progress that gets evaporated very quickly. And so I don't hear a lot. I hear a lot about public in general, but not about targeted tough cookie type publics that actually are doing things that have a direct impact on our ability to reproduce ourselves. So I'm wondering about reception in general and then policy reception in particular.
Okay, I think Emily's going to.
Is this on?
Yes.
Thanks, Rena, for a very important series of points. The reception, I'm sure each of us would have a slightly different answer to the question of how we know what we're doing is being received and in what spirit. I would just say we have comment fields all over everything, and people don't hesitate to answer, or to express themselves, let's just say. I'm being trolled at the moment because I put some things on the Anthropology Now Facebook page that a certain number of unhappy people felt were not anthropology. They were about the recent election. And so, I got a straight message very quickly and in very strong terms about that, and then I chose to try to respond and give another picture of what anthropology could be. So there's this simple comment fields all over the web. The other thing I think is really recent is when we became part of Taylor and Francis and got into all these libraries, thousands of libraries, internationally, we've been flooded with submissions. Flooded. The editor can't even begin to handle the number of inquiries that have come from people reading the publication and thinking, I want to do that too, and then writing, we require a pitch, in the publishing jargon. And we've just been flooded, so I'm trying to be a little optimistic. Of course, we really don't know the vast majority of reactions, but some. Oh, and one more thing. Oh, and the policy piece. What did you call them? Hard heads?
Tough cookies.
Tough cookies. Thank you. The tough cookies. Okay, I don't know how to get to the tough cookies, but we have a list of people we want to reach. We've been thinking about this, and they're famous people. And they include all the science journalists, Ross Chast, Gary Larson, Ursula Le Guin, and Stephen Gyllenhaal, all of whom have some sort of quirky connection to anthropology and could help, but it's a work in progress.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is ask Chip Caldwell to make some comments because we're the most recent startup. We've put a lot of time into thinking about metrics and managing our success.
Yeah, thanks for the good question. And so yes, at Sapiens, it's something we've tangled with very much. How do we know that we're reaching the audiences we're aiming to reach? And there simply aren't a lot of good direct measures. There are, though, a lot of good proxy measures that you can use. So we use a number of digital tools that look at the reach of our pieces, how much they're being discussed online. You can also look at the number of visitors and a range of demographics that surround those visitors and readers to the site. And so essentially, when you combine all of those together, I think it does give you a pretty good picture. It's not absolute and often not specific, but it does give you a good sense of your readership.
Anyone else?
Can I just add?
oh,
I just want
yeah,
to add,
Elise.
Arena, thank you. That was a great question. And, part of what you're saying, you're talking about, who's your audience or who's your imagined audience. And, who you imagine your audience may be for whatever projects, may not be who they are. So at AAA, for example, the Race Project, I don't have the numbers, but it's reached lots and lots of people, both online and through these museum, exhibits, so we know that it's being, we get feedback from the museum folks who are telling us how the material is being used, how the teachers are using, how the kids are using. So it really depends on the product and then who you're, and what the venue is. In terms of those tough cookies, AAA also has behind the scenes constant sort of advocacy of trying to get out the word to them, about the value of anthropology as a science as well as a humanities, depending on the context, AAA can't be a lobbying group, so we can't directly lobby, but we can talk to people about who we are, who anthropologists are, and what the contributions can be. And it is on the agenda, it's constantly on the agenda. In terms of open anthropology, that's why I kind of said that we don't know, we have those numbers, those metrics, reaching people all over the world, but we don't know who they are, and we've talked about, should we have a pop-up, when you're reading it and say, who are you? And we thought, we didn't want to do that. But on a personal level, when I was the founding editor of Open Anthropology, and I would post it on, and I'm really weak when it comes to social media, except posting my grandchild on Facebook. But but when I posted, on my Facebook, the first issue, this woman wrote me, who was a friend of a friend of a friend, who said, oh my God, I spent the whole night. She's an English literature professor who does Victorian marriage. And the first one was on kinship and marriages. And she stayed up all night and read every single article. So that was very welcome, but still, we don't know if it's just anthropologists who are reading this content, because it is actually, written for anthropologists. So it is an important question, but of course, who's your audience?
Okay, yes.
So I have a little bit of a different problem that I'd like to pose than Rena did. As a North Americanist, I get invited into policy conversations, and those aren't my challenging publics. I'm really grateful to be at a university that has financial support and structural support for grad students to do public scholarship. But I'm wondering if you could talk about the risks of doing this kind of work. At the University of Michigan recently, scholars have been getting death threats. And for people who don't work on, people who aren't engaging in explicitly political discussions, but people who are looking at histories of racial difference, for example. And that's very scary. And I am deeply committed to public anthropology and would never allow that to stop me. But it's real. And I would be interested to hear you all talk about those kind of challenging publics and what that means to think about as a publicly engaged scholar.
No, Natalia.
That's a great question, because I feel like a lot of people, I didn't get to mention this, but in the age of the internet, everybody's an expert, and everybody wants, and even though we are experts in our field, people think very quickly that if they read 2 articles on Wikipedia that they could just rip you apart. But I did do a video, aside from Boaz, I'm a science communicator with Nat Geo and Discovery, and I did a video on the fact that the science or lack thereof race, and the fact that there was no real biological basis to racial classification. And anybody that was an anthropologist would watch the video. Most anthropologists would, yeah, of course, this is something we all know. But death threats, people taking the video, making comments about my person, my looks, my statement, using the science the science that I was using to back up my argument. They were backing up their argument, just twisting it, using pseudoscience to back up their bias. And so it's terrifying, but at the same time, as long as you're working with hopefully a university or somebody that can back you up, because Discovery, for the most part, would monitor the comments and things like that. We were mentioning comments. Yeah, don't. I always say don't read the comments, just because they can be so hateful. But at the same time, it's good to have a network of people around you that know that that's a problem. If you are getting death threats and things of that sort, talk to people, get it out there, and I say don't back down, especially in the next 4 years.
I think death threats are actually relatively rare. I did go through a period of time when I was stalked. That had nothing to do with my public writing. It had to do with the fact that I was doing research among people with schizophrenia, and that was a little difficult. The university's job, I was actually offered 24-hour armed escort. I didn't think that was appropriate, but I'm just sharing that I was offered this. It is your university's job to help to protect you, but I do think it's pretty rare. I've never had a death threat based on anything that I've written.
But I also should say that I don't read most of the comments.
Well, we've had two recently in the last couple weeks at the University of Michigan to anthropology faculty who are doing work, and some of them have won major awards from the Smithsonian Foundation. And the farther they're out there, I just think it's happening. I think it's changing.
There's someone in the back there.
Can I just make one quick
Sure,
comment,
yeah.
really quick, before you ask your question? I think this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this working group on tenure and promotion, because we have to provide some sort of infrastructural or structural.
Can you hear?
Can you hear me? You know, infrastructural or structural support to encourage, if we are serious about engaged anthropology and supporting these multiple forms, people are writing for Savage Minds, and you know, why should they take the risk, and I'm talking about risk in general, if they're just going to be discouraged. So I think it's important, if the work is if we consider it valuable and that the content is reliable, which it's not just, it does go through editorial reviews and things are read and processed, and that's what I heard in all of these other publications as well, then we need to provide, you know, a tool to enable the you to you know, this is just one tool to enable you to be able to have the support you need to be the brave person in light of, you know, the whatever threats that are out there. So that's why, again, I say, you know, we all do our bit, and so that project that I described is one little bit.
Okay.
Thanks very much for a fascinating panel. Helen Lambert, University of Bristol. I want to be slightly respond to the question about what more or what else could be doing. I was going to ask about readership, but it does sound to me, although you don't know, that the likelihood is that Open Anthropology and Anthropology Now are indeed being read by other anthropologists. And almost all the initiatives we've heard from are attempts in one way or another to get the publics, whoever they are, to come to us. I just wanted to ask you about going to them. In science, one of the most important ways people have of responding is through mechanisms generally known as rapid response. And that might be indeed op-ed or letters to a journal, or it might be intervening through public media, TV, or newspapers. And the problem, it seems to me, is one that I think only Tanya on the panel referred to, which is the time sensitivity of all this. And I think anthropologists are incredibly good at kind of sitting around and cogitating, but not really necessarily at just getting out there. And it seems to me that partly this is to do with the question of whether we want people to recognize what anthropology has to contribute generically, or whether we really want to share our specific knowledge of specific events and issues with those publics in a timely way. And I've been really struck by the incredible absence in processes such as Brexit or our recent, even more disastrous experience that you've had, of anthropologists with all their knowledge of migration and economic interests, not intervening in that public space. I don't know how we can do this, but I wonder whether, you know, the idea of a sort of college of anthropologists who are signing up to being galvanized sufficiently to, take the rest of the afternoon off, strike a line through their appointments and write something that very day or the next morning to get it out there might not be a really good way to go if we really want to go public with our anthropology.
I'm going to have chair's prerogative here and make a comment directly on this, because in my career, I spent 30 years in the UK and London. And when I moved back to the States, one of the biggest differences I saw was the cultural difference of the media. Because when I was in London, the BBC journalists had Rolodexes of anthropologists and people from many other disciplines. And as soon as something hit the press, they would be right on to the appropriate person. And during my career there, I spent quite a bit of time, on the BBC and the equivalent of public radio and all. And one thing that I think we could do is begin to cultivate the journalists through, public broadcasting or whatever it might be, to convince them that there really is a interest out there for well-presented anthropological work. Does anyone, Alex hasn't commented yet.
Yeah, I think your point is an excellent one. And we were talking recently about the amount of editorial work that goes into all of these things. It's very important to know that there is no editorial work at all in Savage Minds. We just write the posts and hit return and it goes up. So we're very different in that way. And we are quicker, we can be much quicker. I think a lot of times anthropologists are still learning to let go of the production process. And they're not willing to just get it out there in the world immediately. We have a bunch of projects here that operate in a lot of different spaces and in a lot of different tempos, but we don't really yet have someone like Steve Bannon when he was blogging, or Daily Kos or Ta-Nehisi Coates, where there's somebody who's online, who's producing 2,000 words a day. A lot of it is blog entries where you're just cutting and pasting from other relevant blog entries, or this happened today, and the answer from anthropologists is this. Someone said this in this New York Times article that's getting traction, and the answer from anthropologists that we know is this. And there's sort of two reasons for that. The first reason is that you need to have someone who can just do that full time, which is I've done it. There have been various periods in my life when I've blogged that way and I've been on social media that way. And it's exhausting, and no one will pay you for it. And you have an obligation to your students if you're a professor. So the first thing is the massive time investment for doing that instant response. Something comes across on Twitter, a half hour later, 20 minutes later, you got 300 words. That kind of turnaround is really time intensive, and it burns you out very quickly. The second problem is that I think we're really worried about getting expert knowledge. Something is happening in Burma. I have this friend, let me talk to them. They say they can do it next week. Now we have to spell check it. A lot of the kinds of things that we need to do when we blog or do social media for a public audience is fall back on the kinds of things that we're not experts about, but that we teach in introductory classes. The standard lessons of anthropology. Someone says this about race. Okay, I know this because I am a generalist. I think one way to get that rapid feedback on social media is to be willing to return to fundamentals and deepen our knowledge. For cultural anthropologists, we need to articulate with biological anthropologists. I think there's just no way around that. I think that that's really necessary and important at this point. So I think you need to find people with a lot of time and people who go broad, not necessarily deep. Yeah.
Okay, unfortunately, we're just coming up to the hour. And I know we could continue the conversation for at least another hour, but I hope you've gotten something out of it, if nothing else. The contacts that would be an easy access for you into the public sphere. Because I know that everyone sitting here would be more than happy to talk with you to see how you might be able to become involved in their initiatives, or give you really down-to-earth advice on launching off on your own if that's what you want to do. The conversation has been going on here at AAA for at least 3 years now. I hope it continues, because there perhaps is nothing more important in our discipline than getting our word out to the general public, to the policy makers, and to other places that really count. So it only is left to me to thank our panelists for giving us such a nice introduction to what they're doing, their challenges, their problems, and importantly, why they think it's important. And the very last thing is I would like to invite you to the Wenner-Gren 75th anniversary reception, which is tonight at 7:45 in Symphony 3. It's the only reception at the meeting with an open bar. So, please come and celebrate our anniversary.
And prior to that, from 5 to 7 at the local, will be the Savage Minds tweet up. So get started, have something to eat, and then go to Wenner-Gren. The local, just across the street, 5 to 7, Savage Minds.
Okay, and do that because we're putting our money into the booze and not so much the food. Okay, thank you very much.